Whoopsie. Oh. Whoa. Okay. So, good morning.
Good morning.
We are making today a syrup. So, as we were talking about in class here, our focus this year is showing recipes, creating recipes, and within that context of discussing the recipe and showing the recipe, you can kind of learn different concepts about medicine making, about herbs. And so today we are making an adaptogenic syrup. And so the basic concept then is the making of a syrup, right? How do you make an herbal syrup? There's a lot of different ways. This is one of the ways. But this is the way that you want to make it if you're working with roots. So the formula that we're working with here is a formula that, hi Passionate Herbs, good morning. Hi Renee, good morning. We were just talking about you.
Running a little late.
Oh, that's fine. So in this recipe, we are using the following herbs. We have ashwagandha, and we have astragalus, and you can read this. No, you can't. Bink. Hi, Ren. I'm live at the same time as the eclipse. Oh, that's right. I totally forgot that there's the eclipse going on. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you know, both I and the eclipse can be seen later. So if you want to go outside and look at the eclipse, you can come back and watch this video. So ashwagandha, astragalus, burdock, and then Codonopsis. Codonopsis is a Chinese herb, one of the superior tonic herbs of Chinese herbalism, has been called poor person's ginseng because it has kind of the qualities of ginseng, the long-term, deep, nourishing energy production sort of qualities. So that's why that's in there. And then ginger and cinnamon and licorice. So this is actually a tea blend that we have in the Apothecary called Rooted and Connected, and it's just a really wonderful tea blend that we make here. Hi Abahita, hello, and hi Teresa, good morning. So this is the blend. The ratios, if you want to know the ratios, I'm happy to give them to you, but really in a formula like this, the ratios are just use whatever you have. And if you don't have some of these, don't use the ones you don't have. You know, use what you have. You could make this, again, this is kind of the concept of making a syrup from roots. And so this is applicable to anything. You could make this recipe using, and this would be super yummy, roasted dandelion, and cinnamon and ginger and a little bit of cardamom and a little pinch of clove if you're con there. And make like a roasted dandelion chai syrup kind of thing, right? You could make just a burdock or just an astragalus syrup, right? So now, what are the downsides to making a syrup? There's one obvious one, sugar, yes. So whenever you're making a syrup, you're using sugar. And sugar is immunosuppressant. Sugar is problematic. We do want to limit sugar. So this is not a recipe to use if you're not avoiding sugar.
I like to use half sugar, half glycerin.
Yes, well, and you can make a glycerite. You can make a glycerite, which is sugar-free. You can add in a little bit of glycerin to modify it, absolutely. But you're still going to be using sugar. But making a glycerite is a fine way around that. And so what I wanted to point out, so this is I've been decocting for 2 hours. So for 2 hours, this has been simmering on the pot here. This is this tea blend. And I started off, you can see the reduction that's happened, right? So I started off with water up to here, and it's reduced about halfway, right? So this is our very strong decoction. Now with this, I'm using all these roots that are fine with long extraction in water on the stove. Not all plants are going to work well with that, right? What's an obvious category of plants that we wouldn't want to do this with? Flowers, leaves, yeah, the aromatic, delicate plants. Yeah, we definitely wouldn't want to. Though you certainly could if you were doing like nettles or oats or horsetail, right? So some leaves and flowers are going to be robust. But yes, those delicate aromatic ones we want to avoid. But these are roots. They're fine with boiling. So we've reduced these way down and we've made a strong concentrated decoction, properly called a reduction. And so we're going to strain this out. This is a really easy recipe too. It's one of the nice things about syrups is most of the work is just the reduction. And it does smell wonderful. Y'all smelled it when you came in here. It's a very, 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 very nice blend. So this is our then. I'm just going to put you right back there. This is our reduction. Could we replace with honey, or is it a very different product then? So, Abhita, actually, I'm going to be using honey, but that's an excellent question, and I'll go into sweeteners in just a moment, because yeah, we want to discuss that. We want to discuss the alternatives of the sugars that we can use. So the first thing we did is we made our decoction. Now, the thing is, oftentimes we get kind of stuck with the concept of syrups, and we think, well, we're going to make a syrup, right? There's another obvious one. It's the obvious herb that we always use as a syrup. Elderberry, yeah. So everyone thinks elderberry you got to make as a syrup. This is a great way to make an elderberry syrup. But it's by no means the only way to use elderberry, right? You can make a glycerite, you can make a tincture, you can also make a tea. So if you make a tea like this, you could just keep it as a tea. I'm pouring out some little shots. This is the strong decoction. Now this is reduced and concentrated down. So this is like equivalent to 2 or 3 times that blend. So if you wanted to, you could stop here. You could pour this into ice cubes. Tink, they're all tink, 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 tink. You could, and isn't it fun to use these instead of little plastic things? These are fancy. Isn't it wonderful?
This would be so good over ice. I can see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very nice. The licorice in there and the cinnamon gives some sweetness, and the Codonopsis is also very sweet. So there's a lot of sweet roots. You got that spiciness in there. It's lovely stuff. So you could just make this, freeze it in ice cubes, and just use this. If you didn't want to use sugar, then you could do that. But the reason why we do use syrups is because sugar is not only a sweetener, but a preservative. So when we put enough sugar into a formula, and generally that is, that's recognized to be about 50% of the formula. If you have 50% of your, of the volume of your finished blend, all right, we have our container. If we have 50% of our herbal decoction and 50% of our sweetener high, then we have something that is relatively shelf stable. We just made a little decoction that we're sipping on. And we're going to make this into a syrup in just a bit, but you can just have the decoction. These are the ingredients here. So at 50% concentration, then we have increased the sugar content of the syrup enough that it is now going to the sugar content is going to inhibit bacterial growth. So up to a certain concentration, that adding sugar into something is going to make a petri dish, right? You throw sugar into a formula and now you can have mold and other organisms growing in there very, very readily because sugar is food for those organisms. But once you hit saturation point, the curve starts to go down and we start to see inhibition of growth. That is why honey and pure sugar is basically a sterile product. You don't see things growing in honey because the sugar saturation is so high. Likewise, white sugar. White sugar is sterile. You can, if you have a wound that you want to disinfect, you can take white sugar and pack the wound with it. And because you're saturating that liquid, the sugar is so high you can actually kill any pathogenic organisms in there by packing with sugar. So sugar is a preservative when you get high enough, and that is going to be about 50%. So the easiest way to make a tea then, or to make a syrup, is to make a concentrated infusion of your herbs and then add an equal amount of your sugar. And there's your syrup. It's a very, very simple concept. Now, Renee brought up the option that you can add half of your sweetener, so sugar or honey, and then half glycerin, right? So using glycerin as an additional sweetener, and also one of the benefits of using glycerin, especially if you're using honey in a formula, is that glycerin acts as a preservative. And if you have a very high concentration of honey, if you've made a syrup that has a lot of honey, enough that it's going to crystallize, by adding glycerin in with your honey, glycerin interrupts the crystallization response that happens when the sugar content in something gets too high. When honey gets older, or when particulate matter gets in honey, it starts to crystallize. And once it starts to create crystals, the crystals just kind of go, right? Because sugars like to form crystals. That's what sugars like to do. That's how they're stable, is in a crystal form. And so you'll see this chain reaction of crystallization that happens in high sugar saturation products. So you want to interrupt that, you throw some glycerin in there, and that will just kind of put itself in between sugar molecules, and so they can't crystallize because it's interrupted. That chain reaction is interrupted by that glycerin adding in there. So that's nice if you make a lot of honey products, because they can get crystalline when they're older, and then the texture, the consistency is. Here we've got the water diluting it, and so crystallization isn't necessarily an issue here. Hi, Jean from Valley Grove, West Vermont. Are you in the? Because this is a question that everyone's asking right now. Are you in the path of the Huziuetzis? The totality, the eclipse. Thank you. My brain tries to be helpful, and it had the word epilepsy, so which is similar to eclipse, but it's not eclipse. It's the wrong word, and my brain kept on offering it as an option, as the word I was looking for. It was like, no, that's not it. Okay, but what about epilepsy? No, that's not the word I'm looking for. Okay, but it's like a puppy that really wants to make you. Yes.
What time?
Let me help.
Is it happening right now?
Well, someone said that this class was happening at the same. Ren said. Were happening at the same time as the eclipse. So, well, and some of it I know happened yesterday. Someone posted a video from South America where they showed these gorgeous pictures. I'm so looking forward to all of the media coming at us for those of us who do not live in the path. Okay, so we've made our infusion. We've made our decoction properly. We've simmered this, and we've reduced it way down. We're reduced it by half. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add 50% sweetener in there, and we're going to use honey. West Virginia, 96.8%, not total. Wow! Oh, West Virginia, sorry. That's because... That's great, 98%. Now, I'm not measuring it precisely. I've got about 8 ounces here, and this is actually going to be a little bit less than half. Because here's the other thing, if you're making a recipe, you get to make it the way that you want to make it. And if you don't want to put half sugar in there, you don't have to. It's your recipe. If you don't, you want to remember what you're not getting from the 50% sugar, and that is shelf stability. It's not going to last as long. That's okay. It can still go in the refrigerator. It'll last for a pretty good amount of time. A pretty good amount of time being about a month. Yeah, you're gonna eat, especially since I'm giving you all, little bottles. You're not getting 32 ounces of this that you have to down within a month. You're gonna have a couple of ounces that you're gonna be able to do just fine with. But so yeah, I just emptied my bottle of honey in there. So this is a formula also. When we're working with a syrup, we're stepping away from concepts of dosing that we might want to kind of lean into if we were making tinctures, if we were making glycerins, if we were making extracts that were being used for clinical dosing strategies. But this isn't a clinical dosing strategy. It's a yummy adaptogen syrup. It's really, really good for you. And this is one of those, how much do you take? You just take the syrup. Take a couple of tablespoons. Take less than that if you're really sensitive to sugar, because there's sugar in it, but there's not as much sugar as there could have been because we reduced the amount of sugar that's in there. So a couple of tablespoons a day would be a really good amount. There's a good amount of medicine in there. So we are just mixing our honey in with this. Since this had a little bit of warmth in there, it was able to thin that honey out and melt it. If your tea has come all the way down to room temperature, of course, your honey will not, oh, here you go. Your honey will not dissolve as quickly. And so I want to show you, because this is helpful information. So one of the things about using honey is that we have a lot of bogus honey on the market these days, right? There's a lot of things that are being sold as honey that are not true honey, and they're honey flavored corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup. A lot of it coming in from China, from other places, and from here. People everywhere you have folks that are wanting to scam you. So thank you. I was exactly wanting just this. I love these long skinny spoons. I love these spoons. I was wondering how to recognize it's past shelf life. Oxymels gave a layer of gray dust after 1 year. Oh yeah. So because it's got sugar in it, you're going to have two things will show shelf life. One of the most reliable is fermentation. So if you have it in a closed container and you open up that container and you get that little right of compressed air, that's an indication that you're starting to get some fermentation. And if there's a little bit, I would just drink it up really quickly. If there's a lot, I would check it out. I would not drink it. I might drink it myself. I wouldn't give it to someone else, right? There's a lot of things that I'll do for myself, but I'm not going to do for other people. And then also funky stuff growing in it, right? You want to have your product be a pretty clear, not a clear, but a liquid, a strained liquid. We don't want a lot of particulate matter in there, so that we can see if there's precipitation of stuff, right? If stuff was extracted into the liquid and now it's come out of the liquid and you have a thick layer of precipitate down at the bottom, that's important and helpful information to have. So you want to strain for that, unless the precipitate is helpful. And then you also want to strain just so that you can see if there's anything funky growing in there later. So a little bit of a side note. If you want to test your honey, if you've bought honey somewhere and you don't know if it's real honey or not, the easiest thing to do is put it into water. I'll send this around for all of you. and hold it up here. Honey has some waxy compounds in it that make it not completely soluble and rapidly soluble into water. So when you put honey into cold water, it's going to hold its structure, and you're going to see clear margins of the edges of honey. If you have fake honey that has corn syrup in it, it's going to quickly dissolve into the water. And so at the edge of the blob of honey, you'll see it just quickly disintegrating into the water. But you don't see that with this. You see a very, very clear demarcation, that very clear layer of where the honey is. And that'll last for a pretty good amount of time, which everyone knows who's trying to mix honey into iced tea, right? Honey doesn't mix into iced tea. It takes a long time to mix into iced tea because honey has those waxy compounds, where sugar syrup would. So that was just an aside, but an important one. So we
How can that be legal if they put corn syrup in it? Without telling people like.
I know.
So much stuff is like.
So much stuff is like
How
that.
is that legal?
Yes,
It's called
Yes.
capitalism.
it is called capitalism.
Yep.
Yes. All right. So we made our syrup, and now we're going to strain it one more time just to get rid of any little crunchies that are in it. Bink. Hmm?
I wanted to see the filter.
Oh, this filter is so awesome, yes. So this is a really, really cool filtration system. This will screw. This has threading in it. Hold on, let me, because you got to see this. So this has threading in it, so it'll thread onto a canning jar. And then this is a very fine mesh sieve that fits right into it. It's very, very handy. And this also comes with a stainless steel strainer that fits right down in the bottom here if you want something not quite as fine. I love this thing and I use it all the time. All right. So, yeah, where did I get it? I don't know. Off the internet somewhere. All right, so there's our syrup. Our syrup is done. Let's try some of our syrup. So if you have your cups, we'll give you the syrup and then you can compare. Now again, this isn't a 1-to-1 ratio, whoops, so this is more of a very, very, very sweetened, concentrated decoction. Oh, call it a syrup. It's effectively a syrup. Let's have a little
Have a drink on my hand.
a little nugget in, eh? Chop, chop, chop. All right. Dink, dink.
That's good.
It's so good. It's just so good.
Bitterness of a lot of those.
It modifies that little bit of bitterness, but that bitterness is there and it has sort of a roasty. What I really love about it is that rooty, earthy starchiness that offsets the sweetness of the honey. Then you get that little bit of ginger and cinnamon in there. It's so good. I mean, you could like pour this over pancakes, right?
Yeah.
This could be on ice cream. Yeah, 100%. And all of these herbs really love water extraction. They just love water extraction. So this is a very good way to extract the constituents and a very good way of concentrating those constituents, and then a good way of making them shelf stable so you can keep them around with you. So if you go through it and grab, I have little bottles here and a label so you don't have to make your own label. Get a bottle and a label and then label that, and then you can just pour before you leave. You can pour some of this into your jar and take it with you. If you're a local person, sorry, non-local people, come by today and we'll have some of this up at the counter and you can take a shot of the syrup. So, I know, I was feeling all fancy and generous, not having you make your own labels. Yeah, don't get used to it. Don't get used to it.
Too late, I'm used to it.
Okay. All that sugar.
Sugar. I wear it at my body, not like honey either.
Yeah, it's good to know.
Also,
Yes.
before we added the syrup,
Yes.
this was so fucking
good.
It's so good.
Oh my god.
I love that tea blend. It's
Yeah.
just so yummy.
Which one is it?
It's the Rooted and Connected blend. It's
I
just
know
all the
it.
Rudies.
Oh, it
Hmm?
is. You sell it.
Yeah, it's one of our tea
Oh.
combinations. So
I haven't
yeah.
tried that one. I'm like ready for it. Wow.
Yeah, I love it. It's just when you need that kind of grounding feeling, it's all the roots. But, I mean, it's a great formula. I'm a good formulator.
Yes.
So with all of this kind of root energy, it can sometimes feel a little bit overly stagnant, overly rooty, right? For those people who have kind of an energy that is more kind of damp and grounded and dank and a little bit too rooted, and you need a little bit of kind of movement in there, something like this can not feel good to those bodies that are just kind of heavy and stagnant. So throwing a little bit of ginger and cinnamon in there is warming and stimulating and moves that energy and just helps to just kind of break up some of that might otherwise be a little bit too grounding for those of us who needs to be pulled out of our roots and say, look up, yes, look up out of the ground. You mentioned sugar as an immune suppressant. Would you say the net effect of the syrup with plants still supports the enhancement of the immune? Abahita is such a great question. Yes, because it's different. One of the wonderful things about working with plants is that when we're working with plants for immune system support, a formula like this, say, so this blend here, what we're looking at largely is a formula that is helping to reduce stress response in the body, help to reduce inflammatory response, help to strengthen the immune system, help to strengthen the endocrine system. So we have kind of this overall nourishment of a wide range of different functions in the body, which are all going to ultimately help with immune response, with energy, with digestive function and liver function and all of these. And yes, sugar is an immune suppressant, but the sugar's detrimental effects are something that we're exposed to. I mean, all of us have sugar in our diet all the time, which is not to normalize, the amount of sugar that we have in the standard American diet. We eat way more than we should, and it's a really important thing to bring up. And that's why I was giving the option at the very beginning of the class to, if you don't want to use a syrup, which is a really good thing to use, maybe don't use as many syrups as we do, and not think of that as a default medicine making method. Just making it as a tea. Make elderberry tea instead of elderberry syrup. Make this as a tea instead of a syrup. Absolutely, you can do that. And you can even concentrate it, do the ice cube trick, and then throw it into some other things. Syrups are just another way of making medicine that is fine for some people if you're a person who mostly limits your sugars and this is something that you're using. And it's so delicious. For me, I like to use this when I do get a craving for a sweet, because I can take a little shot of this and I'm like, okay, I got my kind of sweet, yummy thing, and that's enough for me to not go and have a cookie. So in that respect, it can be really beneficial. For some people, this is too much sugar for them to have, and they should not have this. It's just not appropriate, right? If I have someone with type 2 diabetes, or type 1 diabetes, I'm 100% not going to be giving them this. Or someone who's trying to reduce their sugar intake. If someone's really trying to reduce their sugar intake, I'm not going to offer this to them because it's not helpful for them and their path, right? So sometimes we're going to do things that are just delicious and yummy because we deserve delicious and yummy is also healing in a different way. And sometimes we're going to avoid that. And so so this just is an option for when you want to do that. And you could also absolutely make this as a sealed simmer glyceride. So you could put this into glycerin and then simmer it, bring it up to heat, and simmer it for a while. You'd want to grind these pretty finely, but simmer them for this, I would simmer for about an hour to optimize extraction and make it into a glyceride. I'm pretty sure I have a video on here on how to make a glyceride. This would be a different way of making it, but that would be another option. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. There you go. There's the class. That's it. It's a very, very easy way of medicine making, doing the syrups. And you can use this concept for, you know, any things we were kind of talking about, having things around. You have some roots around, some herbal blends that you don't know what to do with. You can make them into a syrup. If you have a sleep, you have a tea blends, even like tea bags. You have tea bags that are sitting there, you're not using them, you have a sleepy time blend that you just don't like the flavor of. Well, that's one of the primary reasons we make syrups, right? You don't like the flavor of something, we can just throw some honey on there, it's like, it fixes it. But truly, it's kind of nice to have a sleepy time syrup blend. So take that big box of tea that you're not using, throw the whole thing into a pot of water into water. It may not be able to be extracted for a long time, right? If you have those more delicate plants, you're not going to be able to reduce it, so you just have to use a ton of plants and let them steep for a good amount of time with minimal heat. But you just make a strong extraction, and then throw some sweetener in there. If you're going to use things like date syrup, the yummy date syrup. I love date syrup. Or things like Lohan fruit syrup, monk fruit syrup, the alternative sweeteners. You can use those, but they don't have sugars in them, and so it's not going to be a preservative. You're not going to get that preservative quality. You may have the consistency effect, you'll have the flavor effect, but there is no preservation in using something like stevia or increasing the licorice or anything like that. So, yeah.
For the plants that are more delicate,
Mm-hmm.
could you do, like, would you do, and you want to do a syrup,
Mm-hmm.
could you do like an infusion, the 20 minutes amount, and then strain and then boil that down?
So let's use like peppermint as an example of that, right? If we were doing aromatic plants, we wouldn't want to boil it down because the peppermint, the primary constituents that we're looking at are the volatile oils, and they're volatile, and so any kind of boiling is just going to evaporate them. And so the way that we get around that then is not by reduction or concentrated extraction, because we can't do that. That trick is off the table because it doesn't apply to those kind of plants. Instead, what we want to do is just saturate the solution. Just put as much plant material as you can. So we might, if I was making my my peppermint infusion, I might fill this all the way up. I'll grind peppermint to increase the surface area and concentrate it down, and then I'll put like half of this with ground peppermint leaf, and then just fill it up a little bit over that with water. Way more peppermint than we would generally use even in a very strong tea, because what I'm trying to do is push that concentration just by putting more plant material in there. There's only a certain amount that the plant will saturate, that the water is only able to absorb a certain amount of plant material, and then it's just not going to anymore. And so we're going to go over that amount of saturation by doing this. You are wasting some of the plant material because you're using more than you can. But that's the only way that we can make a high enough concentration of those herbs without damaging them. So that's what we want to do, is just put as much plant material. You can try, and this will be a better option if you're doing the aromatic plants. So again, say using peppermint as an option. You can make one extraction that way, and then pour it off and compost the plant material and get a new batch of peppermint, grind it up, and then take that tea and pour that over the new batch of peppermint. Even though the water has been saturated with plant stuff, you still have the volatile oils that are in there can be pulled out onto the water. So the volatile oils don't go at a certain concentration, they're not going to be in the water, they're going to be floating on top of the water, but the water is a good solvent to pull them out. You'll be able to get those off. All of the other chemistry of the plants won't be coming into the water because it is already saturated and you're not going to get those other constituents. But for peppermint, mostly what we want, especially in a syrup kind of thing, is those volatile oils.
So
Now, one more thing that you could do is you could add a couple of drops of peppermint essential oil to the finished product if you wanted to do that by bumping up. And we want to be really cautious about the use of essential oils internally because a lot of them, lots more than some people tend to think, are not appropriate for internal use. But peppermint oil, yeah, we can use that internally. We can use lemon oil. We can use, so the essential oils that are commonly acknowledged to be safe for internal use, you could also bump it up that way. And I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Karen?
So is this a distinction only with the plants that have the volatile oils? Otherwise, would everything else be okay to do a decoction, even if it's not a root?
Yeah, so if you wanted to make a blend of this would be a great thing. You could make a syrup using nettle and oat straw and horsetail and alfalfa and dandelion leaf, right? Those are all leaves and flowers, and red clover blossoms, right? So those are all leaves and flowers. They're non-aromatic, primarily mineral and flavonoid rich, and those could absolutely be decocted in exactly the same way.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, you boil them down, just reduce them down until they're just a thick, dark, rich.
So it's really
formula.
only the aromatic ones you wouldn't want to do a decoction because of the volatile oils, but otherwise the plants are fine.
Other ones that I wouldn't want to do that with would be something like rose hips, because the vitamin C in there.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So there are some other constituents that are heat fragile.
Yeah.
So those heat fragile compounds we of course want to keep away from heat. But yes, largely it is if we're using dried herbs, it is the volatile compounds. Yes. Also safe for children, a spoon a day with food. Yeah. So this would be a great formula for children. This would be completely fine. Sugar. But it would be completely fine. This also would be really lovely as a sweetener for other things, for other teas. If you're going to sweeten your tea, you can use your astragalus, your adaptogen syrup as a sweetener. One other thing I wanted to show you, if you wanted to extend the shelf life of your formula, you could add glycerin. You could also add alcohol. So oftentimes people will add alcohol to their finished syrups. Generally in 16 ounces, about 2 ounces of a 40% alcohol, 80 proof, will be enough to stabilize it. That'll really extend the shelf life because now we've got alcohol in there as well as a sugar to be a preservative. So you can just add, vodka is 40% alcohol. You can just throw in 2 ounces of vodka and you're preserving it. But if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna add a liquid in, you might as well make the liquid medicinal. So instead of vodka, you could take a tincture. This is ashwagandha tincture. So you can just throw in 2 ounces of ashwagandha tincture into your syrup, and now you've just bumped up the ashwagandha, the therapeutic effect, considerably. This is a 50% alcohol tincture, so you've got that preservation. Now what you wouldn't want to do is you wouldn't want to do the same thing with an astragalus tincture, at least not the way that I make it, because my astragalus I tincture at 25% alcohol. So even though this is an alcohol, the alcohol percentage is so low that it wouldn't give the preservation. So you would want to make sure that the tincture you're using is a 40% minimum tincture. But then, yeah, that's a way of adding in there. I'm wondering what the use of this syrup on a regular basis, would this increase the tolerance of these plants when you need immune support when you're sick? So that's a great question. I think, yeah, your body gets used to the same things over and over again. 100%, absolutely. And so I don't like using the same plants every single day, especially since that's something that we do. There's been studies on the standard American diet that says that we basically eat the same 15 foods the majority of our diet, like 80% of our diet, are the same 15 foods every day. 15 foods. Think of the diversity of the foods that are available, and we eat the same 15. Now, I think that same 15 is going to differ from person to person, but it's probably going to be corn and wheat and soy and dairy and beef and chicken and all of the kind of primary things. And when you give those things, those same things over and over and over to your body, if your body has a certain level of sensitivity and you're continually giving those compounds to your body, you can develop a little bit of a pissiness, right? Not an overt allergy, but your body doesn't like that, and you keep on giving it, and so you can have a reaction, or you can have a decreased response, right? We don't have the immediate and dramatic response that we see from some plants. Some plants we take them the first time and it's like, oh, I love the way this makes me feel. It makes me feel so good. That was just a back thing closing. I know, I was like too. We get that great feeling, and then after a couple of weeks, it's like, it doesn't feel that good anymore, right? Because we've become used to it. Does that mean that it's not working? No, I don't think so. Especially depending on the plant, right? Burdock is gonna work. If you take it every single day, it's gonna work. But I think that it is better to change things up. So absolutely, you could make a blend like this. Well, you could make like this type of blend and then make that. I love the idea of the grass, the weed blend, the nettles and oat straw and red clover and horsetail blend. That's a wonderful blend. So you can make that one. If you did, you'd want to throw some vinegar in here to acidify it, because remember that acidity enhances that extraction of minerals. So making, like I think it was, Mark was talking about making an oxymel. Yeah, that's a great way of doing it. But you can make sort of an oxymel-ish syrup just by throwing a little bit of some vinegar in there. So you could like go back and forth between those, right? Or make one that's a mushroom-based one. So you have your mushroom-based one, and then you have your root-based one, and then you have your weed-based one. And you go around for each of those. You can take your nourishing blend every day, but you're not developing that reliance. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you could do that. But also, if you feel really good taking this thing and you don't want to stop taking it, I don't think that there would be any problem taking it. I do think that if you then had a time, well, especially since, so you're, when we're using things like astragalus and ashwagandha for immune support, it is mostly prophylactic. We're taking it every day to strengthen the immune system so we don't get the thing that we don't want to get, right? It's not appropriate to take something like this. If we had acute infectious, if we had a cold or a flu, we wouldn't be taking this. Not only because it has the sugar in it, but also because it's not appropriate to take herbs like this when you have an acute infectious condition. Those starches are kind of feeding into them. So there's another answer to your question. All right, so there you go. There's your recipe for the week. Try making a syrup. Try taking a syrup. Pour this on your waffles. I am totally going to be using this as a sweetener and playing around with that. And I'll see you next week with another recipe. Bye-bye.
I wanna